I woke up yesterday feeling odd and itchy. My skin was so itchy I laid in bed for 30 minutes violently scratching until I bled. I rushed to the bathroom to look at my skin and I was almost bluish all over. I hopped in the shower and it provided some relief. I thought maybe I had a rash or something, but I was itchy everywhere. Maybe I had spread it while scratching, I don't know, but I hopped out of the shower and got dressed and went to the store to get some ointment. I got multiple different kinds of lotions and practically lathered myself in it. I started looking up my conditions and I figured it was dry skin or eczema or something. It also mentioned bug bites, which sort of makes sense because I have been spending a lot of time outside lately. Then I remembered the bug bite on my ankle. My girlfriend, who was away visiting family, and I have been picking random cemeteries around town and driving to them. The cemeteries are kind of just a direction for us to drive, and we try to find fun places along the way. Thrift stores, dive bars, trails, and any other things that catch our eye. We made it to a new cemetery the other day in rural Kansas. This cemetery looked abandoned. Okay, be not the best way to describe it, but it was not well kept at all. The grass was overgrown, about as high as my waist in some places, and all the tombstones were dirty and weathered. We walked around looking at each grave, and they were all from the early to mid-1900s. We found one grave that was well kept, which I thought was sweet. While walking around, I got a painful bite on my ankle that made my knees buckle for a second. I figured it was a big ass mosquito, but before I got a chance to look at it, an old man with long greasy hair came running from the other side of the graveyard yelling, "Get off the grass, you idiots." He spooked us and we both just ran laughing. I had completely forgotten about the bite until now. I lifted my ankle to look at it and I saw 2 very bug bites with a bit of pus oozing out of them, which I thought was weird because I only remember feeling the one bite, but since that bite hurt so bad I am starting to think this is the root of my itching. What kind of bug could do this? I looked it up and it said it could be an allergic reaction. It says it can be life-threatening, but you know how it is when you look up your symptoms. Hey Google, I have a headache. Oh, that is unfortunate. You do indeed have a brain tumor. So I kind of shook it off, and hopefully it was mild. Besides, the only condition I had was the itching. I did not have red or swollen skin or a rash or anything, so I was hoping for the best. I stayed at home all day, moving as little as possible. It was almost bearable if I stayed completely still. I continued to scratch though, mostly gently, but sometimes violently, making myself bleed a couple times. Even my face was itchy, especially near my mouth. I zoned out and scratched the same spot at the corner of my mouth for I think an hour before I felt a sharp pain. I went to the mirror and the corner of my mouth was bleeding profusely, blood pouring out of my mouth. I tried to stop the bleeding, but the blood just soaked through the towel. I got in the shower again and the water burned my mouth, but I just let the blood drip into the tub. I stared at the shower floor for far too long as the steady stream of blood faded into the drain. I got out and went back to the mirror and was horrified. The corner of my mouth was ripped open into my cheek. I scratched so hard that I gashed my mouth open. I was disturbed. I was hurting. I was itchy and was truly losing my mind at this point. I was in so much pain I knew I needed to go to the hospital, but I didn't have the energy or the insurance to do so. I told myself to sleep and that I would go tomorrow. I took some of my girlfriend's sleeping meds and collapsed into bed. I think I fell asleep almost immediately. I was drained. Today I woke up, and I wish I hadn't. My skin was no longer itchy. I was beyond relieved. I laid there in absolute comfort, rubbing my skin gently. I put my hand to my mouth to see how my cut was doing, only to find no cut in my skin. I frantically felt all over my face, checking both sides of my mouth. I felt nothing. I sat up in my bed, and when I did, my foot touched something at the end of the bed. It almost felt like a grocery bag. I flipped over the blanket and saw a huge pile of something. It almost looked like the skin of an onion. I was confused, quickly trying to think of what it could be. I felt my heart racing as I slowly leaned closer and closer until my eyes widened and I lunged backwards, tumbling off the bed. I think it's a pile of skin, Human skin. My skin. I am scared and don't know what to do. If anyone has any insight or ideas, that would be much appreciated. I will give an update when I can. I work night security at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, and we had a new exhibit that scared the shit out of me. It started about a week ago. A new exhibit came in displaying unique oddities from human history. Basically, it covers strange things from all throughout history and all across the globe. We have books made from flesh, shrunken heads, death masks, you name it, the exhibit has it. However, it's a small idol, carved from black stone, that has caused the most fuss. My job consisted mainly of watching TV screens and occasionally doing a walkthrough of the museum to make sure everything is locked tight and no one has broken in. Most of the time I just watched video game streams. It was during one of these rounds that I first saw the idol. It sat in a corner of the exhibit, almost as if they wanted to hide it, upon a small podium of wood and red cloth. I leaned in for a closer look. Upon inspection, I discovered that it depicted a strange creature. Its body was a large mass of flesh, covered in small spines and held aloft by many tentacles. The head was made up of many eyes and its mouth was agape, as if screaming. Ice ran down my spine and my head suddenly began to ache. An image burst into my mind, unbidden, a mass of writhing tentacles and feelers. Yellow eyes opened all through the tangle and a voice crept into my head. And by Orith, I clenched my eyes shut and the vision faded. I stumbled away from the idol, collapsing to the floor. I crawled back and got to my feet. My head still ached, so I went back to the security room and popped a few aspirin. I put the whole thing down to stress and lack of sleep. The next night, when doing the changeover from day guards, during which they tell me of significant events during the day that might affect my shift, the guard Austin told me a man had attacked other patrons. I told him to show me the footage. He pulled it up on one of the screens and pointed. See for yourself. Shit was crazy. I flopped down into the chair and hit play. The scene started with a man standing in front of the strange idol. My skin broke out in goosebumps and I shifted uncomfortably in the chair. The man stood before the idol, then suddenly fell to his knees. He began sobbing, then crying uncontrollably. Another patron knelt down next to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. The man spun around and wrapped his hands around patron's neck. He pushed him to the ground and squeezed. Other people tried to pull him off, but he wouldn't budge. Eventually, Austin came on screen to tase the guy. He fell off his victim and convulsed on the ground. It appeared that blood was running from his eyes. That night I was filled with anxiety. I kept thinking about the footage and found myself staring at the screen that showed the idol. There it was, just off to the side, tucked away in a corner. I wiped some sweat off my head and clicked the screen off. Later that night, while I was watching a live stream on Twitch, I heard a crash, like a window breaking. I got to my feet, scooped up my flashlight, and headed out the room. I moved slowly, shining the light around at every exhibit. I came to the room with the idol and was about to go right past when I heard muttering. I crept around the corner and shone my light in the corner. A man knelt before the idol, head bowed, arms in his lap. He was muttering to himself and moving around strangely, almost swaying. I drew my taser and crept towards him. As I got closer, I began to make out some of his mumbling. I caught to words that made me freeze. And by Orith, I felt my blood go cold and a lump rose up in my throat. I raised my taser. What are you doing in here? I demanded. We're closed. I'm contacting the police. As I pulled out my phone, he slowly turned. He clasped a knife in his right hand. His hands and arms were covered in blood from slashes across his wrists. He smiled up at me. His demeanor was calm, almost blissful. Only the worthy may lay eyes upon the Lord of Dissonance. I have been found wanting. He raised the knife to his face and shoved it into his right eye. Blood and goo gushed from the socket as he moved to his left eye and repeated the act. His smile never faded. I turned and bolted to the security office. I snatched up the phone and dialed 911. I was aware of my cell phone in my hand, but there was no way I was staying near that man any longer than I had to. The ambulance showed up shortly after and carted the man away. I had called my boss and told him what happened. He arranged a replacement and sent me home. All that night, I dreamed of ice and blood, of fog and a strange green mist. The man's words kept spinning around in my head. His smile haunted my dreams. I woke around 6 p.m. and made myself something to eat. I contemplated calling in sick they would completely understand, but I needed the money. I showered, dressed, and headed into the museum. In the car park, I loaded my Glock and buried it in my backpack. I wasn't doing this shift unarmed. Austin told me that people had been acting strangely all day. An elderly couple had apparently stripped naked and began screaming at the top of their lungs. Another woman was found in the bathroom, banging her head against the mirror, and a middle-aged man had attempted to break into the idol's case. And finally, an elderly man had started ranting about evil books and gods from between the layers of reality. He had screamed at Austin that the idol was evil and had to be buried. I sighed and took the keys from him. A violent storm rolled in around 11 p.m. and it was around midnight that they came. I saw them on the front entrance camera as they climbed the museum steps. A small group of hooded people. In tow behind them were others, dressed in casual clothes. I swallowed hard and fetched the pistol from my bag. I heard a window smash and the sound of voices, not even trying to be quiet. I got to my feet and headed towards the idol room. I crept slowly along the hallways, leaving my flashlight off. The moon shone in through the windows, providing grim slashes of light to see by. I found the group in a circle. They had smashed the case, and the idol sat in the center, surrounded by the casually clothed people who knelt. The hooded figures had their hands in the air and were chanting something in a language I can't even begin to repeat. The idol started to glow a strange green color, and the robed figures drew knives from within their robes. They placed the knives to the throats of the kneeling people, and by Orth, one of them said, and dragged the knife across. Blood poured out in a violent spray, coating the idol, which seemed to flicker and blur before my eyes. Lightning cracked and flashed. Images stung my mind. A deep green mist in which dark shapes moved and slithered. Giant tentacles waved lazily about. Pain seared my brain and I dropped my pistol, clutching at my head. Another throat was cut. Eyes opened in the mist, hundreds of glowing yellow monstrosities. I turned and ran. I couldn't stay there anymore. I left them to whatever horrors they were performing and bolted. I ran out into the storm and didn't stop until I reached my apartment. It's been 4 days since that night and the images still haunt my every dream. I haven't been back to the museum since and have been ducking all their calls. I can't stop thinking about that idol. It's been the only thing I can focus on. I wonder if it's still there. Alright, let's get one thing straight. I live in an old manor house. Yes, I know what you're thinking. Ancient walls, secret passageways, dusty chandeliers, dozens of servants, the whole Downton Abbey shtick. But hold your horses, it's not Downton Abbey. It's more like Downton Shabby. I inherited this charming pile of rubble from my father, who inherited it from his father, and so on, all the way back to my 14 ex-great-grandfather. He was given this castle and some land by the king after he slaughtered a bunch of people in a battle over a flock of sheep. Family pride. Right. I'm the last of my line, the final fruit on this round family tree. So naturally, I'm stuck with it. Since my accident, I'm out of a job. So I spend most of my time wandering these crumbling halls, marveling at how a once great manor has become a magnet for every kind of weirdo. Let's talk about the so-called paranormal investigators. These are the folks with their gadgets and gizmos, trying to detect ghostly presences with things that look suspiciously like modified children's toys. New Age folks and hippies on weed, flitting around chanting and waving sage like they're in a Shakespearean play. And then there are the junkies, leaving heroin needles in my garden, I mean, really? And before you ask, yes, I've tried to sell the house dozens of times, but nobody would take it even if I paid them money, not that I have any. I get it. Okay, the place looks like the perfect setting for a horror movie. But trust me, I'm a skeptic. Weird noises. That's just the old pipes or the wind whistling through the gaps in the walls. Flickering lights, faulty wiring, obviously, yet the stories persist. Everyone claims there's something off about the place. If I got a penny for every time somebody calls this place haunted, I'd be able to fix the leaking roof and install some actual plumbing. It doesn't help that people are afraid of me. I haven't had actual contact with anyone for ages. Last week, it was a group of teenagers daring each other to spend the night here. I just wanted to politely tell them to bugger off because, well, it's private property. But one girl saw me and fainted on the spot. I get it. I'm not exactly Hollywood material, rather a typical penniless aristocrat with holes in my tweed blazer, ugly red pants, and a scruffy beard. I might look a bit rough around the edges, but a monster? Hardly. And here's the kicker. Despite all the tales and the so-called evidence of hauntings, I've never seen a damn ghost here. Not a whisper, not a specter, nothing. And I've lived here for 268 years and counting. So, if you're thinking of visiting because you're hoping to catch a glimpse of a ghost, don't bother. You'll just be wasting your time. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go shoo away the latest batch of paranormal experts from my front garden.